Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to episode 151 of The Glow. So good to be with you in this moment right here and right now, coming at you in the evening today on the East Coast, just after 8 p.m. Eastern. Some technical issues getting going, so about 8:21, 8:22 p.m. in the Eastern Seaboard. Welcome, Leanna. Welcome, Jackie. Welcome, everybody. When you're entering, please share where you are. Leanna joining us from down under, Australia. Jackie from North Carolina. Hey, everybody. Welcome. Please share where you're from. There's a heart button. There's a wow button. Express yourself. Annie, our wonderful producer and beloved, is in the house. Amara is here, our special featured guest today. We're going to bring her on in just a few moments. It's so good to be here with everybody. It's such a blessing to share in this way. Welcome, Hampton in Colorado, right? Such a blessing to be able to share in this way. Phyllis in South Carolina. It's such a blessing to share in this way, to be here together. And your thoughts, your comments are welcome at any time. Feel free to ask comments, questions, join the conversation. This is live, this is spontaneous, this is real, this is here, and this is now. And this also airs on iTunes, it airs on YouTube, it airs on SoundCloud. So you can find us in all these wonderful places. You can find us on the replay here on Facebook. I want to let you know before we get into the conversation here that we have a silent retreat coming up. Just put that out today. So the registration's out for August 31st to September 3rd, what we call Labor Day weekend here in the States. And I'll tell you more about that as we go forward in the coming weeks. But you can register now, and I'm really looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to being with you for that. And there's just 10 spots available. And silence, as Amara knows, is a great way to connect with yourself and get in touch with yourself, realize who you really are, and express it in the world. So let's bring Amara right now. Adding, connecting. Yes, there you are.
Hello.
Hello. How are you feeling?
Super. Excellent. Amazing. How about you?
Good. It's morning your time.
Yes.
My time. So a special time for the Bali people. It's like after 8 o'clock, like 8:30 a.m. We're 12 hours opposite.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So you guys are, okay, in the evening. Yeah. We're just getting started. You guys are living in the past.
Yeah. We're living in the past or the future or something. I don't know.
I'm in the future.
We're all living
I'm the next
now,
morning.
right?
Yes. We're so here right now.
Yeah. So okay. You're doing some amazing stuff. I actually met you in Bali. The first recollection of meeting you was in a line to the ecstatic dance, and we had some conversation and communication. And it just started to tap into more of what you're doing and what you're sharing in the world. It just felt a really deep resonance, and really, really appreciate what you're sharing, and really appreciate some of the conversations that we've had just interpersonally, one-on-one. And just felt like it would be great to share some of what we shared, just share this, as I had this feeling a lot of times, which is kind of the impetus for what I'm doing with these episodes. It's like, wow, these conversations are great. Wouldn't it be great if other people could hear them, And then it's like, oh, well, actually they can, right?
Yeah, it's so true. I have this experience when I talk to my friends, our really deep, courageous conversations, as I call them. I think, wow, we should just be sharing this, all the time. So, gearing up for that when you can, get our intimate things and our deep thoughts out to the world. Thanks for opening up that space.
You're welcome. I love that deep, courageous conversations. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing, courage, because people think of courage as like, fighting someone on a battlefield or whatever, or some kind of boxing match or something, which I guess has a form of courage, perhaps. But like, I think the kind of courage that doesn't get talked about or noticed about is this courage of like being able to really express yourself from this deepest, most authentic, vulnerable place, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what you've kind of dedicated yourself to, and that's what you're like inviting people to step into, right? So speak to that a little bit.
Beautiful. Yeah, I always say that Strength, if we look at strength, like a coin, it has two sides. And one side is that side we typically think of being very committed, being courageous in that stand up kind of way. And the other side of strength is vulnerability. And it's more that yin aspect, that that's receptive and it has a fragility. It's fragile, but it's not a victim. So I describe it as like strength being both the pyramid and the rose. So the pyramid is like the strongest thing on the planet. It's built out of the strongest substance. You can't argue with a pyramid. It's not going anywhere. It's like, boom, it's present. It's strong. And then flowers are our other most, they're so valued, and we use them for our funerals and for our weddings. And, we spend a lot of money on them, but a child can kill a flower, but it has this incredible strength. So that's the other side of strength, this vulnerable side. So in the work that I do, I mean, my Lama used to always say that, or not always, but she used to say that awakening is only for the most courageous. That's a line that they say in Tibetan Tantra. It's only for the most courageous. So I create a field or work in a field of this that really invites in the courageous ones to come forward. And they'll feel it in my work because it comes to the point where you get to the edge and, you fear that commitment or you fear that vulnerability that's coming up, and then you have to make a choice. Am I going to be, as we say, courageous and meet the unknown, meet the what I don't yet know, drop the ideas or identities that I built up around something that now I'm seeing isn't serving me, and am I going to step into the, kind of off the cliff? How do you get yourself to go off the cliff in a good way and not flinch? A lot of my, training in the Tibetan Tantra, I was, was studying Mahayana and Dzogchen, Tibetan Tantra. Basically, they teach you not to flinch at the moment of transformation, that courageous moment. Like, don't go.
Don't. The other way I would say it is, what's the term I'm looking for? Contract. Don't contract.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, that's what happens when you're courageous. One of my clients just in the last workshop we did, he said, he said he said most valuable workshop he'd ever taken in his life. He happens to be a Tantra teacher in another country. And he said it was like walking yourself into a knife. So so that's my new term now. It's like walking to the knife. Here we go.
That's a good testimonial for you.
Yeah, it's like, can I advertise that? I'm not sure people are going to sign up. It's like I hold the knife and I'm just like, come on. And I said it was the best thing that ever happened to him. Got really real, and had the courage to be more of who he really would love to be, so that he could be of service in those ways. Oops.
Mm-hmm. Well, you talked about letting go of beliefs and ideas, right?
Yes.
And it seems like the most fundamental aspect is letting go of beliefs and ideas about yourself, right?
Yourself, the world, others.
Mm-hmm. And it's all kind of interrelated. Like the way you view yourself determines how you're viewing others, and how you're viewing others determines how you view the world, and right. So what would you say are some of like the core, like the kind of fundamental beliefs or ideas that if you uproot those, you sort of uproot a lot of the other stuff that's connected to it?
Yeah. These are those core beliefs that are, I'm not enough, you're not enough, the world is not enough, it's not okay to be me. Everywhere I go around the world, the sentiment is always the same across all cultures, across all experiences. I just want to be me. But people are so afraid to be me, and they're really afraid to let other people be themselves. And what they mean is they want to be their evolutionary self. They want to be free to learn and to grow and to evolve. And I'm going to succeed, I'm going to fail, I'm going to fall down. Instead of being ridiculed, they want to be supported. And they want to go, oh, right, let me learn from you, with you on that moment. And They just want to be free to explore themselves and to, and to have a supported experience in that. Everybody wants that. But we're so afraid of being that and letting others be that. And it's what everybody wants. So uprooting those beliefs, I guess, around, being authentic is dangerous, or the real core one is I'm not good enough. This whole planet isn't good enough. It's not going well. It's not going to be okay, or it's even dangerous to be myself. It's dangerous to speak my truth. It's dangerous to let
Yeah.
others do the same. Those are the real limiting, survivalistic, fear-based, lack-based perceptions.
And what do you find that people are afraid of? Like, if I be my authentic self, it's too dangerous to be my authentic self. Like, what are they afraid of?
A lot of people, well, now we're not so much afraid of physical things, and a lot of our fears are in the psychological realm. We're not afraid of, if I'm myself, I'll get, dragged out in the town square and persecuted, although that is still happening on the planet. But it's moved into I'll get rejected, I'll get abandoned. And people really, we're not trained to deal with rejection in a really positive way. And there is a very positive way to embrace rejection. Again, it takes a lot of courage, and it takes a reconditioning of how you perceive things. And it's kind of along that line of, wow, if I get rejected in this way, how awesome, because now I'm free to go where I actually need to be.
That's so true. That's so
Yeah.
true. But I think the problem is that we think we know better. So I mean, I can definitely look at this in my own
Okay.
past. Where, like, I think I know what's best. I think that I'm supposed to be with this woman, right? So
Mm-hmm.
she rejects me, and it's horrible because I'm supposed to be with her. She doesn't understand, and
Yeah.
we don't, if we could just fluidly move with this no is a yes to something else that's taking us to where we want to go, then we're in alignment with truth. We're in alignment with the flow. We're in a, we can use various terms, awakened consciousness and so forth. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, that's where the ego comes in, right? The ego thinks I know better than life. I know more. I know the way it's supposed to be, and it's not. And of course, the ego always thinks it's going wrong. I know there's this resistance to the moment.
Yeah, beautiful. What you're talking about is a hot topic in my field right now. It seems to be
Mm-hmm.
coming up. And this is where we really fall in love with the potential of what is more
Mm-hmm.
than what is.
Yeah.
And it is within our human nature to, to evolve and to grow and to make the best of. We tend to like that. It's a creative force
Mm-hmm.
that says, hey, you and I, we could be doing amazing things, and we could be like this and like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it really needs to be founded on what is.
Mm-hmm.
So, when we are really feeling into real hyper presence, and really looking at what, say, this woman in this scenario, what is she really saying? What is she afraid of? What does she value? And what does she keep pointing to? And if I just work with that moment to moment, what does that bring up in me? Then I don't get ahead of myself into this projected potential. So we do project onto people. There's a positive, we could say, or beneficial aspect to that, and then there's a negative aspect to that, or a less useful aspect. And what you're talking about, I think, is that, say the man is like, but come on, be what I want you to be, so that we can be what I want us to be.
Yep.
And is she willing? Does she have the capacity? Does she have the desire? These things
Mm-hmm.
need to be deeply addressed before,
Mm-hmm.
it's talking like, using like, you're kind of like, you've got this cake in front of you, and you're like, I don't really like this cake, but if we just fix this and this and this, it'll be an amazing cake.
Mm-hmm.
You're actually cheating her of the experience of somebody just really liking her cake. It's like, Just go find a cake you like. Then the potential is the icing. You know, it's like, wow, this cake's amazing that we are together. And now let's ice it. That'll be super cool.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the potential is just the sprinkles or whatever.
Yeah.
But you're not forcing it to be the kind of, yeah, that me. I want it to, I see a potential for this to be totally different than what it is.
Yeah.
And let me drive in and do that, because that gives me a sense of control. It gives me a sense of purpose. It gives me, it fills my needs to do what I need to do, which is not really in consideration of what the other person's experience is.
Well, here's a really radical concept. I don't even know if it's a concept, but here's a really radical thing to say. What if what's best for us is always what's happening?
Yes.
What if what's best for us is always what's happening?
There's when you have very little filters on your perception, that is the only perception you're ever seeing.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's radical because the mind has been trained in, we could say, survivalistic, egoic, dualistic,
Yeah.
activity. That's how it operates, and that's fine. That's had some very useful, that got us to where we are today. It's a very useful perception, but it's certainly not the only perception. And there's a perception that brings us into thriving, as it's called, really divine perception, that embraces the trinity of perception, as I call it, at the very least. It has these three ways of perceiving kind of all put together in a triadox, kind of a multiple paradox of experience. It's all just okay being one. And what all that fancy talk leads to is exactly what you're talking about. Just what is happening is exactly the best for everyone involved. And it's radical because people don't like to hear this, because it means so many things.
They really don't.
But the good news is, it means you have the birthright to see it and to change it.
Mm.
Not from a, this is bad and I'm going to turn you into the kind of thing that you need to be so that we can be like you were talking about, but from a very open space that says, wow, look at what is. What do we want to do about it? Do we want to do anything about it? Is that exciting for us or not? Let's do that. And if not, what is exciting for you? Bless you on that. I'll find someone else who is excited. And this resonance will start to happen in a really beautiful way.
Mm.
Then we get into the mastery of humanity, really creating a win-win-win-win-win everywhere we go. Mm-hmm. And this is our evolutionary mastery. The win-lose is so been done, it's been... It's like, great, I win, you lose. Like, so what? I really don't think that's interesting for humanity anymore. Like, new, craftier ways to win and lose.
Yeah. And I think also reconstructing the belief or the story around the loss, right? So this is something that I think, like, I've looked at a lot in my life, is like things that seem like they're a loss. You look back later and you can say, oh, well, that was a gain. That was amazing. That was a turning point in my life. That was an opportunity to go this way, So I think what we call loss, I'm a loser, I lost. First of all, it's always an opportunity to grow. And that's what we're here for. We're here to grow. We're here to learn. We're here to evolve. We're here to learn how to love. We're here to learn how to express ourselves more fully and deeply. And so anything that's considered a loss or a failure, that opportunity is always there. In fact, it's more there than the wins, right? So which is better, the winning or the losing, right? It's all relative in how you look at things.
Totally. This is what I call the trapportunity of life.
Yes.
So it's always both, it's depending on your perspective, is it a trap or is it an opportunity? It's always going to have some of both from a relative perspective. When you're beyond the relative or within a more expanded view that encompasses, the everything and the nothing, inherent within the something, not separated out, you can't fail. It's a joke. Like, there's no you that can lose. There's also no you that can gain. And so
Yes.
this is the part where, when I take people to the edge of that perception, they all have this like, I'm going to lose everything. And in a sense, it's true that
Yeah.
that perception does sort of seem to imagine that it's going to lose everything. But the big
Mhm.
joke is, on the other side, nothing's lost, nothing's gained, and you're free. You can't be bought and sold. You're literally a free thinking, free acting, free responding being, and that's a powerful human right there.
It feels like what you're pointing at. Yeah, I would say if I had to put it into a word, it's really about freedom. It's really about freedom. You could also say it's about love. And I think if you go, what I find, if you go deep enough, those two things are actually the same exact
Yeah.
thing, right?
Yes.
So I think it's really about freedom, but it's a different kind of freedom than people normally talk about
That's
freedom,
right.
right?
It's not the concept of freedom, because
Mm.
people have concepts of love, right? They have concepts of freedom that usually involves really like an idea that you're projecting out into the way something should be. Um, that's a packaged up kind of conceptualized freedom or love, and those are okay to have as authentic, unique preferences, as long as they're not getting in the way of the deeper experience of freedom, which is, yeah, people say, I get this all the time, people asking, what do you, I put people down in a certain experience where they're able to access the depth of who they are, and you ask them what they want, 90% of the people will say, I want to be free. It's our birthright. It's what we're meant to be. It's actually what we already are, but
Hmm. That's the
we've
craziest
forgotten
thing.
it.
That's the most amazing thing is like, what do people want the most? They want to be free. Well, you are free. So it's like, what is this thing of like, we are free, but we want it, but we don't want it. We're like somehow conflicted, right?
Yeah, look at a human species any species that asks itself regularly, who am I? What am I? Like, who does that? What in nature does that? That's a conflicted species.
Yeah.
And by default or by design or, a little bit of both, how that has evolved, we really have to just work with what we are, which is a conflicted, uh, we're like an existential crisis species, and it's a lot simpler than we imagine. But it will take some looking at some things that haven't been looked at yet
Hmm.
within ourselves and within our collective experience that is going to make a lot of people go, whoa, wow,
Uh-huh.
okay, yeah, that sort of explains a lot. But you can do it all just within your own inquiry,
Mm.
and find that within those big, cosmic quantum truths. You find them within you. You're a piece of that. You know that you're a fractal of that, and that has all the wisdom in it. So then, when you open up, you're living in presence. You're living in what is, and from a very non colored glasses. It's and meaning when you see something, you're able to hear it and see it, and not overlay. What does this mean for me? What does this mean for me? What does this mean for me? What am I going to get out of this? What am I not going to get out of this? And constantly be referring to the me. And then people wonder what's going to happen to me if I live like that? It's sort of like asking, how do you live without an ego, right?
Yeah.
And I loved my Lama's answer. People would ask her, how do you live without an ego? And she would say, oh, much better.
Nice.
And it's true.
Uh-huh. So you grew up in Arkansas in America, right?
I did a long, long, long time
Long,
ago.
long time ago. So how did you become Amara Samata? Growing up from
Wow.
Arkansas, like how did you get from Arkansas to Amara Samata?
In Bali, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't. Of course, I don't
Um,
like geographically what plane did you take, but like mostly on the consciousness level, like how did this awakening, this
yes.
relation to a deeper truth, come into being for you?
Okay. Yeah, I was a very inquisitive child, as all children are. I was the why child, but why, but why, but why. and always questioning reality, and had an innate sense of wanting to know what's actually going on here. I had a way of looking at the world that I sort of came in with this outsider perspective, which, was a blessing and a curse, because it helped me see things others were not seeing. And I did have a knack for fitting in and not fitting in at the same time. I've always been that way. When I was very young, I had one of those epiphanies in my life where, describe it like my parents wanted me to go to Sunday school on a Sunday, and I wanted to ride my bike. And they were like, no, you have to go to Sunday school. And for me, I actually liked some of Sunday school, but it meant putting on these tight black patent leather shoes that were really tight, and they hurt my feet, and this little dress, and sitting on this hard wooden bench for hours and listening to stuff that didn't resonate with me. And so I didn't want that experience. And I said, why do I have to go to church? And my dad said, because if you don't, you'll go to hell. And in that moment, this illumination just came forward. I remember exactly where I was standing and what I was feeling. And it said, my own inner wisdom, my own inner guidance rose up and said, if I don't believe what he's saying, I'm free. And it broke my relationship to beliefs as a real thing. We think our beliefs are real. We actually think they're real. We believe they're real, so there you go, right there, and you're locked in. And our beliefs come from all kinds of places. But, oh, I might go to hell. Okay, well, I don't want that kind of thing. So, there's a belief right there. I could have taken that in and started living my life according to, there's this concept of something that may or may not be true in some relative or unrelative, who knows, some reality somewhere, who knows, where's the proof of that, whatever. We could get into a whole thing about, you could write volumes about that, whether or not that's true or not. But what I realized, arguing whether something is right or true is not actually it's not the interesting question. There's much more interesting things that take you beyond right and wrong, true or untrue. So I broke my experience with belief, and then I got very fascinated by truth. What is actually true? One that day I went out and rode my bicycle all over town. So this kind of put me on this quest of a lot of, throughout my life, religious studies, spiritual studies, self-help, love, relationship, anything I could get my hands on that was talking about what is life, what is God, what is truth, what is freedom, From Arkansas, I moved on. I moved to, spent some time in Oregon. I spent time in California. I lived in Los Angeles. I was an actress in Los Angeles. It came from when I was very young, I was shy, and I wanted to get over my shyness. So I enrolled in some acting classes, and then turned out to be what they said was good. And that just continued into this track. I went to NYU for theater arts, and it got me out into the public and speaking. And then one day I said, if I'm 10 years into my career, if I'm not ecstatically happy with my life, I'm going to quit and do something else. Because I have this thing where a decade is enough. Like if the decade isn't paying off and you don't want to sign up for another decade, like get out. Yeah?
Yeah, I'm with you.
So I did the acting thing. I was making a movie, and in my movie trailer, just, silly, stupid movies that I made that paid the bills, that were fun, and or not. And I said, wow, I'm not really happy. I don't really like acting. I certainly don't like the product I'm making. I wouldn't buy it. What am I actually doing? What am I doing? So I stopped and I said, what's the one thing I love? And this is really important message for people, is when you're in a shift and you're changing, is look at what do I love, or what could I love, or what did I love? And really get a hold of what you love. This is a great way to propel yourself into the authentic, just empowered living of what you are. All that beautiful stuff that we all want. It's, really follow what you love, why you love it. and really pay attention to that. So I loved yoga. So I came back, I did, and I enrolled in yoga trainings. And for the next decade, I taught yoga and studied and became a mother, raised my son. I thought I was going to live in Hawaii and be like a yoga teacher and a pottery teacher and garden. That was what I thought was going to happen.
Mm-hmm. So when did your name change? First question. The second question, was there a moment of awakening into the true self that happened for you that stands out to you?
Yeah. Okay. So my name Amara came from Yogi Bhajan, the founder of the modern Kundalini yoga movement. He gave me that in a private session with him, meaning pay attention to your infinite nature. My name Samata came from Amachi, the hugging saint, who I've had a close relationship with over the years. And I asked her in my mind for a last name so that I could just take on, I think I kind of wanted to I just knew inside I wanted to leave behind the kind of all the thing that my name just meant before. And I wanted to kind of give myself a chance to create a new, more free, open identity. So that's what spiritual names are kind of all about, is two things. One, they give you a chance to disconnect from certain energies and take on something else, be careful of that. And then they also point to your potential. So every time you say your name, you're thinking of your potential. So it's more of a conscious naming. And she gave me the name Samata as my last name. Oneness, or that kind of equilibrium throughout all space and time. So infinite oneness became what my potential apparently was. Okay, so cut to, we moved to Singapore, and I got introduced to, in my, kind of spiritual pursuits, I was introduced to a Filipino mystic and healer. He's more of a demystic. He kind of likes to demystify things. And I had a very profound experience with him. I'd had many little ones that had led me up. I thought they were huge at the time in yoga and different meditations, but they were leading me up to this kind of bigger experience, falling away of the ego. So the egoic construct was really disassembled in my mind. And I lived for 7 days without a primary sense of identity. And what I discovered was this intense flow of ease that happened everywhere all the time. And we kind of, that thing of when I just get out of my own way, great things start to happen. It was like that, only instead of me trying to get out of my own way, I just wasn't there anymore in that way. And so it was like really easy.
One thing I've learned from talking to people in these episodes, if you're trying to get out of your own way, you're still in your own way. That I can verify.
Okay, good. So that didn't work. But actually just dissolving that perception, that was pretty awesome. So I said, wow, what's this? Because that's way better than how I've been living life. What is that thing?
Yeah.
I started asking all these questions, and a friend of mine said, oh, wow, you're speaking what she called Tibetan Tantra. I said, great, where's this Tibetan Tantra stuff? Like, give it to me. They were like, no, it's secret. You'll never learn it. So it turned out there's one lineage that will accept you as a student according to your experience, not according to how many years you've studied. And that's the Dzogchen tradition. So I said, okay, universe. I was very good at manifesting. I'd manifested my whole life in many ways, that I came to learn that I don't really know what I want. I get what I want and I don't want it. So this I that's driving my desires is pretty useless. Let's get on to bigger and better things. So I manifested I said, universe, I want a Tibetan Tantra Dzogchen teacher. I want them living in my house, teaching me every day. And the only requirement is they speak good English. Go. And a month and a half later, I had a female, she was a German woman who was trained in Mahayana, Gelugpa, and Dzogchen teacher. And she was teaching in Singapore. She had just become a Lama a year before. She only had, I think she had like one student. She just started. I sat in front of her and had a huge experience. And I told her what happened. And she said, yeah, you need to study with me. So I hosted her, and because that's also what they do, is kind of go around. And so I brought her in, and she was living in my house, and I hosted her for 9 months, and she taught me every day for 2 years. About a year with me, and then we got her set up in Bali as well. And she still lives here. She takes very, very few students. She's a mother, and she's focusing on raising a child and other things right now. But, she's very good at the theory and of what was happening to me, and the kind of booked, learned, that kind of understanding. And then the work I was doing with the mystic, which was the founder of the inner dance movement, that was like real kinesthetic experience of the theory. So a year later, I had what is called, for a long time, I called it the tipping point, not just to not freak people out, but we call it a spiritual awakening.
Tipping point, I like that.
Yeah. It's a point where if we described it like you're tipping water out of the glass, and there comes a point where if you just keep going, like you can't get that water back in the glass. It's not going to happen, right? So like that happened, seemingly, depending on what level you're talking about. But I didn't wake up, because eyes don't wake up. There's no me that's going to wake up. What happens is the illusion of who you are falls away, and then awakeness is just what is. And then that's just the beginning. That has a whole maturity onto itself. So you're really kind of like a baby, but in a different spectrum, It's sort of like, yeah.
I reckon, I really, thanks for sharing that. That was a beautiful recollection of your journey. And I resonate with, actually, you brought up the church and Christianity. There's a term in Christianity that I think is actually really apt to what you're talking about. And the term that they use is born again, right? So it literally is like you're like a baby. It's like a new life. You have to learn how to walk, how to talk, how to think, how to feel, how to perceive with your senses. It really is a good word for what you're talking about. It's like having a second life in this same body.
And they were totally keyed into exactly the truth of that. Absolutely. I mean, my father was a Southern Baptist preacher, and I grew up around the religious field, and I have great peace with that. And we talk all the time about our similar, different views,
Yeah.
Same thing, different languaging, different.
Yeah. Beautiful.
If
anyone has
any
comments or questions, I just want to jump in. Just want to let people know if they have any comments or questions. Go ahead and ask. You can type in and share. And again, you can share where you're from and how you're doing. And you can hit the heart button. People are hitting the heart button, the wow button. There's all kinds of crazy buttons down there. Fun ways to engage. So feel free to join the conversation. You were saying, Amara?
Just that it's fun. People like to hear it, I suppose. Just two things to it. In that awakened experience, and like I say, many things lead up to that, and there's different ways that happens for people. But I went into a process of primarily 7 months of nearly unbearable bliss to my system, 24 hours a day. It resets everything. It resets your relationship to sleep, to food, to clothes, to sex, to relating, to the world you live in. I mean, everything just gets, shaken up. And
how did these things change? We want to know how all these things change.
Well, first of all, I'll say my teacher, since my awakening was so like boom and explosive and huge, she would say, oh, you must have been very dense before. So the bigger awakening means the bigger the contrast, which means the more asleep you were. So if those who are kind of chipping away at the asleepness, or the illusion, sometimes you can wake up and it's in a way that just kind of gracefully slides into it. So I don't want people to get the idea that like a huge awakening is like the goal or whatever. It just means that I was a little bit of an idiot, so mine was really big,
That makes a lot of sense. I don't think I've ever heard it stated quite like that before, but that makes perfect sense. Like someone like Eckhart Tolle, who was like completely asleep, he has this huge awakening because he was completely asleep, where if he was like somewhat awake, he wouldn't have been this huge thing to write about. It would have been pretty insignificant. So that makes perfect sense.
So it's true. It is a big day, though. I won't lie to you. It's a big day when that happens. I made a deal because I had been trained to meet that day. I had been trained that moment was coming, and I had been trained for it for a year. And you don't have to train for it all. I mean, you could it is possible to self-illuminate. And that's what I teach people to do. And I have a lot of tools for that, but it is your nature, to try and wake yourself up is in some specific way is like silly. But anyway, we think that way and we work that way. So wait, what was your question?
Well, I'm interested in that, actually. The paradox of that is really deep and kind of important, and kind of, because like, let's go into that. So it's like, to try to wake yourself up is silly, because you're already awake and you've always been awake and you always will be awake, but yet you feel like you're not awake, or you think you're not awake, so you have to try to wake yourself up, but you're already awake. So there's like this, It's like this fascinating paradox, right? And depending on where people are at, I imagine when they're meeting you, is you reflect them back to themselves in different ways on that journey.
Yes. Yeah, well, when you are hitting up against a paradox, this is a very good sign, because everything becomes a paradox to the relative mind as you're hitting that threshold of unity, if we'll just call it that right now, or oneness, where all paradoxes disappear. And then you'll hit a double paradox where you really, I call it the checkmate. Like you really can't, in any direction you go, there's no escaping the paradox to that kind of mind.
Yeah, it's so when people come in contact with you and they come to your retreats or your classes, you said you have some tools. So what kind of tools are you working with people?
So because we have the perceptions that we do that are creating an experience of reality that seems to be very real.
Yeah.
We really need to work with that and honor that. That is what's happening.
Yep.
And having some lofty idea that it's not happening is just going to kind of turn you into some kind of, spiritual narcissist or something. So, so inquiry. I've never seen anyone wake up without a question. Buddha said, or a tree. You need an inquiry and a tree. But I did wake up in nature. It's true. But somebody here had an awakening in my house last year. Yeah, they woke up in the garden. So get yourself some nature and a good question. We work a lot with self-inquiry. So it's learning how to ask the deeper and deeper question, and then how to not so much answer it from the mind. There are some answers that the mind will give you that are important, but it's more about when, kind of living that answer. First answering that, and then letting those things go and realizing they're not as true as you imagined. And then really living what's uncovered from that inquiry. So what I do is a full being examination of who you are, physically, emotionally, mentally, and energetically. Some people might call spiritually. I call it TSI. It's like your total self-intelligence is what we're activating. So this is your TSI inquiry, where you get on a mat and you ask yourself. I take people into a very accelerated process in which your body begins to remember who it is. A lot of what it goes through is releasing all the things within it that are in alignment with what you're not. So people will begin to shake, or they'll move in waves, or they'll start to tell a story of what's no longer true kinesthetically. It looks wild, and people freak out and have all kinds of ideas of what they think it is. So that's why I keep it in a real, in a context of let's look at what actually is happening here. And the testimony again and again and again afterwards is I feel free.
Yeah.
And I feel light. I feel free. I've never felt like this. It's amazing.
Yeah.
So that's the kinesthetic answer to the question that's being asked. And there's an emotional answer to the question. Simple questions like, what do you want? What do you need to remember? what's been the hardest thing for you? What are you committed to now? Knowing all of this truth, what do you choose? I mean, this gets answered with your emotional intelligence, your physical intelligence. People will immediately begin to cry when we ask questions in a total self-inquiry, allowed space. Then, of course, your mind has memories, it has ideas, it will say stuff. That's fine, that's great. And then the energetic field will start to also click in, and things you can't really explain will begin to become understood. That's how I do it.
Beautiful. Love it. I love what you're saying about the shaking. Like I also know people they'll have twitching or tics or these
Yep.
different things that manifest. And I love that you kind of like embrace that, or you see that as part of the movement, part of the journey. I think
Mm-hmm.
physical, like, because I feel like a lot of the traditional religious teachings are like, be still, don't move. If you shake, you're doing it wrong, right? And my feeling is like, in fact, there's even, the state that I'm in, there's a tradition of people called the Quakers, right? Where they would come in
Okay.
the meeting calls and they would shake together. That was their form of
Beautiful.
prayer, where they would quake or shake together. So I think that there's something really valuable in this process about, and also like things like authentic movement or authentic ecstatic dance.
Yep.
These kind of practices where you can just kind of shake it out, whatever way that things are coming through. It seems like it's really valuable. It's a really valuable part of this process.
Yeah, so what I discovered, exactly what your point is, Brian, what you're talking about, is that the masculine, what I call the masculine systems for awakening, like the ultimate we'll call Vipassana, that's it that sit down. We were raised in a sit down, shut up, be quiet, behave yourself society, and then you take it into the spiritual field, and of course it has a beneficial side to that. No, really stop, sit down, really stop, be quiet, right? And then there's this other side that's like, shut up. That's very damaging.
Mm-hmm.
So there's always, two sides to every story. But what I found was that the masculine systems did not work for me. They just didn't work. It was not my natural way of self-realization. It wasn't going to happen through the sit down, shut up, be quiet, and awaken yourself. And I know for some it does. There is this the way that stillness creates, the Kundalini energy and all of that, which I can talk about later. But how that all rises up, it does for some people. I would have to say that if we looked at like just result oriented, if we said, okay, what is the point of all these masculine, be still, zenified experiences, are they waking people up? And if we looked at it like a business, like, all right, let's see the results. What do we got? I'm not seeing the results. Like where are all the awakened people who's like,
Mm-hmm.
we should have hundreds of thousands of people on the planet, like really fully awake from that. So I said, wait a minute, what's going on here? Like, okay, there's benefit, but I'm talking like, what's this beyond thing that I don't, what is that? So I did the opposite, and I went into a space where what is was embraced. And when I laid down, I mean, I was like a tornado, like everything that was not in alignment with my truth just started literally coming out of me in this like wild expression. It's very feminine, so it's a feminine style of awakening. And then what happens is it does come into its stillness. That's how it does it. And it worked like, I mean, 1 year of intermittent practice brought me to what I was searching for about 12, 15 years before. So I found what I was seeking, which I realized I was not trained to find. They don't train you to find, they train you to seek. You're like, whoa, finding. Wait, I was not expecting that. Wait a minute. That changes everything. Yeah, so we need these. So one of my missions is to bring out into the world the acceptance of and the access to feminine styles of awakening for men and for women. We could call it, the creative, the yin or the creative, expressive side of awakening that gets often demonized in the past. Beautiful experience. I had a lovely teacher who taught Vipassana, and I met him after the tipping point, and he looked at me and he said, "Yeah, okay." He saw it and he knew what had happened, and he invited me to. I had signed up for his workshop, and I said, "Well, what do I do now?" It's like kind of trying to meditate and do yoga, and all that stuff fell away after my awakening, because why do you do what you are? I mean, that's just like that would make me
I
laugh for
totally
days.
understand. Yep.
So he said, "Come, it'll be good for the others, just come and just be yourself." And so I was in the Vipassana at the end. We were doing this Vipassana thing, and I just got filled with this immense amount of joy. And I stood up in the class and I started dancing, and I just danced myself out of the room. So that's what Vipassana is leading to. Like you say, it's like, yeah, we sit down and then we go into the wild dance, and the wild dance comes back and we sit down, and we need both of these. It's not a this is the way, that's the way. It's really both. It's always both.
Beautiful. You said something to me once there's a phrase you said. You have a lot of phrases I really appreciate. The one you said that I really liked is the beautiful lie. The beautiful lie. Talk about that.
The beautiful lie?
Yeah. Beautiful lie. Like you're talking about how like thought, belief, story, it's not bad. Well, I guess now I'm speaking what you remember you saying, but you're saying like it's not bad. It doesn't need to be gotten rid of, but it's also not true.
Yeah.
Right? It's like a beautiful lie.
Yeah.
And I think that's important.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's beautiful because when you wake up to, I don't know, the deeper perspective, it's so exquisitely, amazingly beautiful, from what we would tend to call something that's beautiful and amazing, all the way down the spectrum to what we would call absolute horrific experience.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what because of our fears of perpetuated horrific experiences, we tend to think that if I don't view that as horrible and awful, it's gonna continue, and I must make a stand against it and make it stop. And although there are ways to make a stand against things and make them stop, and I'm all for that, the view behind that is not that, there's a deeper understanding that too is also grace. And it's a very tricky thing for the mind, but when you hit that, then the perpetuating of these horrible things literally begins to fall away. It just falls away. It's exact opposite of what we imagine. So it's kind of embracing the all. We embrace many things except that, right? In life, like everything but that, or everything in another person except that. And again, we're back to the rejection of what's okay and what's not okay. You can have a relative okay, not okay experience. That's fine. But when that's the only thing you're having, you're living at best a beautiful lie.
Jackie says, once you realize the story is just a construct, you don't need it anymore, and it loses its power. So what I was going to say and add on to that is the sense of the ego, right? So for me, I can have a sense of, okay, I'm Brian, you're Amara, I'm here, you're there, I'm in Pennsylvania. I can be familiar with that whole story. Like, I don't have to get rid of it or squash it. It's a beautiful lie. Like, it's actually really beautiful. It's so sweet, But when you take it as real, and that's the only reality there is, that's when the suffering comes into being.
Yeah, we have our... I do this whole process around story. So when I work in my deep retreats or individuals or, however I'm working, we do this whole thing where we bring out the old story of your life. You bring out the full-fledged, everything that you've been believing. It's called your limited story, your story of limitation. And you just bring it fully out. We really need to call out what, kind of the pink elephant in the back of our minds. Let's just bring it out onto the table. So we bring out the story and we just call out every person, everything we ever did, everything they ever did that contributed to the story. And then when you get it out, then we deeply honor it. We thank it for having been so. And then we burn it. We have a big fire burning ceremony. And to be kind of slaying, we let that shit go, you know. That's like, and it's a, you know, and we anchor it with the smoke and the fire, and we really get that, you know, into your system. And then from that day forward, you can't tell that story anymore without knowing you're telling a lie. And then we create the new story. So this is a conscious story.
Great. Love it.
And yeah, and there's nothing wrong with living a conscious story. The last story you're going to have, if you're going to wake up out of story, which will then ironically bring you back into any story you want, and all kinds of stories, they'll still relate back to story, but totally different. The last story you tell yourself is, I have no story. It's still a story.
Still a story.
Yeah, so you can't really
kind of a boring one, to be honest with you. In my personal perspective, it's sort of a boring, I have no story. Well, have something that's interesting, have something that's exciting, have something that's adventurous, have something that's alive, that's passionate, that's inspiring. You know, tell me a story like that. The people that I know, honestly, the people that I know, for everyone listening, that are the most awakened beings, they're also the best storytellers. They're tremendous storytellers because they know it's all just story.
Yeah, and then it's like you say, you know, every moment the story is unfolding, and you embrace that story. Every moment you're born again, and you embrace that birth. Every moment you're dying, you know, you're dying into that, and you embrace that. I mean, you're not doing it, but you know, it's like the universe, like nature, you know, yes, it's happening. And there is the story that's happening, it's from the perceptions that are coming from all around. At the core, there's no story. I mean, and that means, like Buddha said, there's nothing, and that's why everything is possible.
Love that. There is nothing, and that's why everything is possible. That's beautiful. I love that.
Annie has a question. And then we get into our freedom. Go ahead.
The process unfolding you're talking about, Amara, reminds me so much of what unfolds during breath work, circular breath rebirthing. Are you also teaching breath work as a way to access the deeper subconscious beliefs that are limiting?
Okay. Yeah. So I typically in private groups, in public groups, I start with about 5 minutes of breath work. People who have worked with me, and many people who come into the field, it happens immediately. They don't need to go into the breath work. But a lot of people who don't know how to self-process or drop into the truth as, you know, a way of accessing the truth of who you are, instantly they need that breath work to kind of get them in the game, so to speak. So what I say about breath work is it's a great tool. Once it brings you into that kind of aha moment or something you can get a hold of that's kind of takes you over, you run with it. Leave the breath behind. If you're still trying to hang on to your breath while you're having an awakening, that's not going to go well. You're like, oh, wait a minute, my breath, you know, like that you that's doing breath work dissolves. Yeah. So that's the thing that I have so many breathwork friends that I love them, and I love the work they do, and it's super powerful and amazing. But you know, when I do breathwork, it's like let me off the string, let me go, like I'm ready to fly now, you know. And so I'd like to see breathwork offer more of that, letting it go. People come over and they're like, breathe, and you're like, I'm in another dimension. Like, there's like, what are you talking about, a breath? Like, what? You know? So, and it's very funny because there's an agenda. So I work with no agenda. The only agenda is to have no agenda other than to be supportive for that which is. But breathwork is a great way to get into it, and I recommend it. And sometimes people will do breathwork through my processes because they need to have that little thing to hang on to get them into a certain space, and I totally allow them to do that.
Cool. Yeah. Avni has a question. It's a very long question, but I'm going to try to get into it here. After Vipassana, I had a huge awakening experience. It was around the role and silent impact of my ego in who I was being and really getting to know myself at the soul level, in quotes. The ego made me seek attention, talk more, seek for approval, and get that validation. Everything I did was motivated through the ego. After this realization, suddenly I felt that this kind of ego-driven life had no space in my life. I went in a cocoon for a while, and then when I came out, I had to find new ways to relate to people and life without it being motivated by my ego. This really changed a lot for me in terms of who I am and how I relate to others. I have a question on this for Brian, but I'm going to ask you. As I've noticed, he shared relatively little. Okay, we'll both share then.
Yeah, let's hear, like,
Question.
yeah, Brian, share.
Since having this awakening, it's kind of lost its essence somewhat. After coming to Singapore, I feel more and more that the letting go of the ego came back on scene as a result of various reasons. How do you organically keep this going and get back to where I was after Vipassana? This is a really great question, right? And it's something that like a lot
Yes.
of people are grappling with, shall we say. So I'll
Yes,
just
many.
add a few reflections, and I would like to hear from
Please.
you as well. Um, I think the key is kind of what I was saying before is to integrate the ego. To me, it's about not trying to like squelch the ego or crush it or hope it never comes back or let me get back to the bliss state that I was in whatever particular time, because that all is ego. The ego, who's wanting to do all those things? It's the ego, right? So the ego is not a problem. The ego is not bad. The ego is not something you need to get rid of. It just is what it is, right? So it kind of relates to what I hear you saying, and what you're offering people is just to really deeply embrace what is, to be with what is, to love what is, to love
Mm-hmm.
what's arising, and also recognize and realize who you really are beyond whatever is arising, beyond whatever comes and goes, beyond whatever appears or disappears. So I think that what I find is people will have an awakening, so an experience that kind of blasts them open to their true self that's beyond ego, and then the ego returns, and it doesn't mean you have to get back to anything or go forward to anything. Just be with what is and allow whatever's there to kind of flow and unfold. But now you realize the truth of who you are, right? You realize the truth of who you are beyond that story.
Yes. Yeah, this is a very tricky point for many people who have had an experience, a satori, or a taste of awakening, a taste of emptiness, as it's called, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Or I also see people having a taste of divinity, and that will change your life, for sure. That moment. I mean, it's definitely worth all that happens. But there are a lot of things that can happen out of that. I call it the rally of the ego.
Mm.
Um, it goes away, and sometimes it will surge back in,
Yeah.
even stronger, because like, hey, you almost like, what did you do to me? And it will
Mm.
come back.
Mm.
So, all right. So what she was saying is that she had an experience that helped her see beyond herself, beyond her old way of operating.
Mm-hmm.
And that, had a very significant impact upon her perception. As long as there's a you that's still questioning you and wanting to know how can I anything, you're still always going to be left with a part of you that's feeling like a you and having to work with that. And that's where we get into, how do I meet surrender again and again? How do I create the conditions for surrender? What is surrender? And how do I
Mm.
live sort of continuously in a surrendered state, if you're going to call it that? And well, a lot of it is what not to do. What not to do, as you said. I learned early on, every time I would have a transcendent experience, just a little peek at it when I was younger, I would say, oh, I got it, I did it. And my eye would come in and just like claim
Yeah.
itself right in that experience, and it
Yeah.
would fall away, right?
The other really big thing that happens is I want to get back to that. That's the thing people hear all the time.
Yes.
I want to get back to that experience.
Okay, so
Right?
right there, what you're taught in Buddhism, or that I learned, is you wait for those moments, when those moments come, and they will, that mind that loves to say, how do I?
Mm-hmm.
You just don't engage that. You learn, they call it, you don't feed it. So it will rush in and will say, how do I, because it wants to keep, it wants to have, it wants to utilize everything for itself. maintaining separation. And it will find any way it can do that. You know, it's just the slipperiest little thing. And that's okay until it's not. And then you start to see, oh man, I'm going through these loops again and again. You know, what's really going on here? And then it's really beneficial to, make peace with the egoic perspective that's now not going to play a big role in your life. And again, we're back to, it takes a lot of courage because there's nothing in it for you. I love what Adi Ashanti says, you know, in awakening, there's nothing in it for you. There's no you that's going to go, oh, I'm back in this amazing state. I'm back in this flow. I am awake. Ooh, yeah. You know, like, yeah, I've got it going on in that way. Like, that's not how it works. So there is this kind of grieving that's really important that I find for people to realize I'm not going to get what I want out of awakening. And, you know, the ego's view of awakening is, or enlightenment is, I get everything I want and none of what I don't. That's really its imagination of what it is. And we can't imagine anything beyond that. And we can't imagine why would we want anything that's not that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's an illusion that ultimately perpetuates pleasure and pain and, you know, suffering. And so we have to go what's beyond. So there are ways to, for her, let's see. It does have this quality of like, well, what's the point? Whenever I meet clients that are in the what's the point phase, they sell something really big and they're like, oh, what's the point of doing or being or trying?
Yes.
Yeah, I always, you know, don't stop there. Like that's
Yeah.
great. You made it to the what's the point experience. Great. Don't stop there. There's an awakening of mind, awakening of heart, and awakening of body. You need two of them to have a significant awakening, at least having two legs, as they say, to walk on. So the mind really taps into the emptiness aspect, and it brings a great sense of peace. The heart breaks into the fullness, the unity aspect, and it brings great joy. That's its byproduct. And the body seems to tap in to the something, you know, not negating the self, as you're saying, embracing the self, not from that limited perception, but a self that's a part of the all, you know, and the embodiment of self. And that realization brings about bliss. So peace, bliss, and joy are the three main byproducts of an awakened perspective. And when you are that which you are, there's nothing to get back to. Those are just there. You can't really get away from them. They're there. But yeah, if you try to grab them, it's over.
And they're there underneath whatever's arising. I think of it like almost like an ocean. Like there's surface waves, so there's kind of surface things happening. Like there can be different emotional things that you notice, but there's this underlying essence that's underneath whatever's rising on the surface. And I think there can be a confusion around that people have about this unchanging essence of who I am, and recognizing that as opposed to what's happening on the surface. So Abney says, I want to find a way for my life to be expressing through my soul and less through my ego. Brian and Amara, what daily practices do you recommend that will help me be even more related to and operating from my soul? So I just wanted to speak to something. I was going to bring it up anyway, but I think it relates to what Abney's bringing up. Is I actually talked to you a few months ago on the phone, and I was sharing that I went into this I actually had the flu. I went into this like really, really, really intense flu, and through that had these really deep spiritual experiences. And there was this real deep sense of like, kind of what you were saying, of like, nothing needs to be done. I don't have any motivation to do anything. Everything is fine as it is. Everything is okay as it is. I don't need to have any kind of a future. And so it almost came across to people that I was like depressed, which I didn't feel depressed. I just felt like, really I felt, and I still feel to this point, that I was actually seeing the truth, the absolute truth of what is. And kind of through time and kind of being with that, there was sort of an integration that came back in of this kind of world of time and space and Brian the person, and Brian the person now has a lot of motivation, a lot of drive to create things and do things, and but what I find really fascinating, I still find really fascinating, is where does it come from? It's almost sort of like a mystery, where it comes from, as opposed to before you're like, okay, well, the ego, I want this, and it's going to make, like everything you were saying, it's going to make me better, it's going to get me more, make me more of myself, I'm going to be bigger. But you don't feel that when you're kind of, post awakening. It's more of like a mystery. It's more of just surrendering to the mystery, surrendering to the creative flow, and letting that move through you in each moment.
Yeah, because you can't stop the tree from fruiting. What is
right.
what is out of all the stages, there is this out of the nothing. Who is it? I think that's not Zen, but it's like a Zen Buddhist. They really said it the best. Out of the zero came the one. Out of the one came the two. Out of the two came the three. And out of
Tao,
the three, the Tao. Thank you. And out of the three came the 10,000 things. It's talking about emptiness, unity, duality, trinity, and then infinite possibility, which is all one thing.
Yeah.
So what that means in relative language, what that means is you can't stop the arising, the birthing of a motivation. It's not coming from the same place anymore. It's not coming from you. I mean, it is a bit of a mystery, we could say. Where is it coming from? I mean, I have my answer to that, but it's that rising and falling is going to happen. I mean, look at Ramana. He sat in a cave and let bugs eat his legs. And he did not engage. He did not move. And he became one of the biggest teachers in the world. They came to the cave, they drug him out, they wrote books, and it turned into a huge thing, right?
Yeah.
And he did nothing. He did nothing. And look what happens. And I see this all the time, when we're doing the nothing, when the nothing is what is doing. Get ready for the something. Here it comes,
Yeah.
But it's very effortless.
What it's doing, get ready for the something. I love that.
And that is what also is, right? So you're going to have suddenly something will arise like a preference, and it's very funny. It's like, oh, there it is. So we have a saying. So the first in Buddhism, in Dzogchen, there's a path called the path of allowing. So I would say to somebody like her, really allowing what wants to be, really tapping into yourself. Do you want to be still? Be still. Do you want to move? Move. Do you want to sing? Sing. Do you want to write? Write. Do you want to contemplate something that brings you into an emptiness? Do that and really start looking at what is deeply wanted. We have to come into a relationship with our needs, wants, and desires. I haven't found a way to get out of this. We have to meet them to transcend them. So what was there was something I was going to say about that, but anyway, connect to what you want and feel into it and give yourself a chance to try what serves your soul. There's something I was going to say about, but I lost the thread of it.
I feel like it always comes back when it's important. It'll return. If it's important, it'll return. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, it comes from presence and it arises and. I mean, I saw this with my own teacher too. He tried to be, the moment he tried to stop being something, I mean, the whole world just crashed in on him and pulled him out. And like literally people would fall into these expanded states and then they'd start screaming at him to speak. Like his students would start screaming. That was their truth. And he would have to show up. The world will call you out. But getting in touch with your soul and what it wants, what feeds it. And really not being apologetic. Oh, I know, it was the path. So the path is the path of allowing, right? This is a path headed towards what we might call the awakening.
Yep.
So what do you allow and why? In that, you're going to start making choices about what not to allow. And you're going to start looking at like, I allow this, but can I allow this?
Mm.
No. And why? And what if I do allow it? What happens? We start breaking down our resistance through this intention of allowing and following through, and really getting discerning about the allowing at the very least. Once you've had an awakening beyond a self that is or is not doing something for a reason, then the path changes to the path of no accepting, no rejecting. And this is where you're really in that space that doesn't indulge and it doesn't deny, no grasping, no aversion. And you learn how to live from this space. And it's like, it's a very strange experience, not having an egoic desire. It's kind of like being something and nothing at the same time. I mean, people ask me, like, what does it feel like? It sort of feels like, just different things, like kind of like being a cloud, but a very, very effective one.
Nice. An effective cloud.
She seems to be very effective at what she does. Once you've gone into no accepting, no ejecting, and then you go into the path of abiding, where you're starting to head into full realization and really living that in all ways, in all times, then it's no accepting, no rejecting, no non-accepting, no non-rejecting. Yeah. So beautiful. There's nowhere for you to move. There's nowhere for a me to move within that. And there's nothing to deny within that. And then you're back at what's happening, and you need deep awareness. So awareness practices, anything that gets you aware of how you think, how you react, how you respond, and why, is going to open the door for, yes?
Yes. Beautiful. We need to get out of here. Tell me, anything else you want to share? Anything you have happening? Your website is up, amarasamata.com. People can check in there to see more what's happening for you. But anything else you want to say before we go?
Let's see. Yeah, for those who are interested in connecting with me, working with me, this is I have. On the website, by the mid to end of this year, I'm going to have online programs that help people with self-realizing tools. Those are all in production right now. If you want to work with me in person, I have workshops I'm going to Lithuania, Finland, and Sweden. We have openings in Europe, in Finland, and Sweden that are happening August, September. You can find those on my calendar. I have 5-day intensives, very, very deep dive intensives, and I'm still doing open to the public this year. That's happening in, I think, end of September, and there's one also in November in Bali. So just look on the calendar. I also do a level 1 training program for those who want to. I work with people who are healers, coaches, chiropractors, therapists, mentors of all kind, and they come and take my level 1 training of inner guidance work, and that really takes their work to the next level. And then, of course, I do have a track for those who want to do this core work, and we have a certification program and a way that we work with those people and help them with their outreach and their affiliates. And so there's different ways to get involved with me. Just look at the calendar. You can reach out, write to us. I'm going to the U.S. in October. I just found out 2 days ago I'm being sponsored in San Francisco. Yeah.
Fantastic.
I'm going to Vancouver, Canada in October, and for my new affiliate center that's opening there, Inner Guidance Institute Canada is opening. Vancouver, we're kicking that one off with some programs, and then I'm going to come down at the end of, that's the end of October, and then around the end of November, I'm going to be in San Francisco, and
Great.
I'm going to be meeting a lot of very interesting people there. I have some privates that are going to be open, and we're doing a weekend intensive, and that's also going to be magic. We're headed into Silicon Valley. I work a lot with techies.
Yeah.
Conscious techies seem to find me very fascinating, and a lot of quantum conversations that come out of that experience. And so, yeah, find me, connect with me. I do. I might do one more trip to Singapore this year. If not, for sure next year. I love working with Singapore. So, hi to Singapore people. Stay connected, and we'll show you what's going on there. Yeah, there's a lot unfolding. I have centers, online programs, and workshops, and now moving into
And you have a great website, and all this information can be channeled through there, right? Through your main website.
Yeah, and at the very least, just write us an email through the website and say, hey, this is what I'm looking for. How do I do? How can I do this, or what can I do? And I also like to answer questions too. If you want to write a question or friend me on Facebook or something, I try to take the time, if I can, answer it in short ways. Otherwise, I do Skype sessions as well. Yeah,
thank you so much for being
here.
Yeah, it's so good.
I love our conversations, Brian. You're one of my deep thinkers. I love it. Anytime.
Yeah.
Anytime. Let's jump on. So many other things we could be talking about. So fun.
much more. We'll do it again in another now.
The ever present now, as I call it. The ever present now.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do that.
Okay. Thank you so much, Amara, for being here. Ciao. All right. That was so much fun. So much fun. Really appreciate space with y'all. We'll keep the conversation going on a thread. So if we didn't get to everybody's questions, we can keep it going on a thread and respond at a later now. Be back next week. I will be in Sweden next week. Julie Day will be my guest. We'll be back to the regular time. This was a fun, different time. Got some different people in here. Welcome to the whatever this time zone is for you. Welcome and thanks for being here. And we'll be back at 11:30 Eastern next Tuesday. Check out the links at the bottom to dive in more deeply to what I got going on. You can there's a link where you can get these episodes delivered to you by email. There's a lot of stuff down there. The silent retreat I mentioned, European retreat coming up. Love y'all, appreciate y'all so much. Thank y'all for being here. See you in the next now.